Hi everyone, welcome back to Slimefun 101. I'm Italy and today we're going to be looking at electricity. Now this is when Slimefun starts to get really good and really interesting because we don't have to do everything manually. So let's get into it. So if we have a look inside the guide, we go to the energy and electricity section. I've got a lot of new items. So what we need first to get any network ready to have its electricity is we need an energy regulator. Okay, you can see here it's made up of silver ingots, an electric motor, Damascus steel, and it's made in the enhanced crafting table. We've covered how to use the enhanced crafting table and how to make items, so I'm going to be skipping past that. Okay. The other items that we're going to need some capacitors. And if you have a look inside the guide, you can see that it says it has 128 joule capacity. Now, this might start to get a bit confusing, but it will make sense. So what this means is that this capacitor can hold 128 joules of capacity. Think about it like a battery, it's going to store some electricity. Now, capacitors are also used as your electrical wiring, so you can move the electricity throughout your base and to different machines. I will be covering that as we go through this video. There's different size capacitors, so this is the small one with 128. The next size 512, 1024, 9192, and so on up. Okay. The other part we'll need is we're going to need a generator to generate our electricity. And for that, and for the basis of this tutorial, we're going to use the basic one, which is a coal generator. Now, as you can see here, we've got two different numbers now. It says it's got a 64 joule buffer and a 16 joules per second production. So what that means is it's going to take 4 seconds producing 16 joules to fill up the 64k buffer. Sorry. It's going to take 4 seconds. It's going to take 4 seconds to fill up the 64 joule buffer, and that will be the energy that we can store. Now, your generator will continue to produce 16 joules of electricity, whether you use it or whether you don't use it. So just bear that in mind. That's why we need capacitors. Now, this is all sounding very, very confusing, I know, but when we start to build it, it'll make more sense. So let's place down our energy regulator, and it will say that there's no energy network found. This is because we've not got anything which is producing any electricity. Now, if we place down our coal generator next to the energy regulator, it now changes to 0 joules. That's because we've not given it any fuel to burn, so it's not generating any electricity. However, if we now give it some coal, we can see the coal starts burning, and we can see that the number of joules in the energy regulator is now increasing. When we looked inside the guide, it said that the coal generator could store 64 joules of electricity, and that's what it's doing just now. So we have 64 joules for our machines to use. If you look inside the coal generator, it's still burning fuel. Now, it will continue to burn fuel even though we are not using any of the electricity. In order to store more electricity, we then place down our energy capacitor. We place that down. We can see that it's now turning green, and we're now storing a lot more joules of electricity. That will now continue to update over time. And if we place another one, I will make that neater. Okay, we can see now we've got 2. That one is now full. We're just waiting for that one to fill up. And we can see that we're now storing even more electricity. If for some reason something happened to our coal generator, like it ran out of fuel, and just to speed up that process, we'll just destroy it. We still have 256 joules of electricity. That's because that is what's stored inside the capacitors. If we had machines connected to it, it would start to deplete, and when it reached zero, the machines would stop working, the capacitors would turn red or turn black, and our network stops working. So we'll pop our coal generator back because we'll be needing some electricity. Now inside the coal generator window, you'll see we have a blue panel and an orange panel. Now this is a typical window for any electric machine. The blue panel is your input and the orange panel is your output. Now because this is an energy regulator, we're going to put items into the blue input section, but there'll be no items coming out in the orange section because it's producing electricity. When we use the next machine, you'll see that that's different. Now the other thing about capacitors, before we move on to the actual machines, is that they are also used as your wiring. Okay, this means that we can go up to 7 blocks away from any capacitor and the electricity would reach that spot. So for example, anywhere that the redstone is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we'll take that away too. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You get to hear me counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as you can see, we can go 7 blocks in any cardinal direction from the capacitor, and that has now got electricity flowing to it. We can see that if we place a capacitor on the 8th space, nothing happens. If we place it on the red, we can see that it now starts to fill up and is getting its energy. That would then mean we can then go another 7 away, 2, 3, 4, 7. We'll pop the redstone just to highlight that as well. Okay, so you can make a large energy network with very few capacitors, and all the you could have lots of machines on all of these red spaces, and would all get power. So now we know how to lay our network. What can we do? So if we go into the guide and we go back to the energy area, okay, so back into energy and electricity, we have things like electric furnaces, we have electric gold pans, heated pressure chambers, so many new things. Okay, there's over 2 pages of different electric machines, but for basics we're going to look at the electric ore grinder. Again, that has got a recipe which uses slightly more advanced items than the basic machines. However, they're still made in the enhanced crafting table. Now what this will do, it is an electric version of the ore grinder that we looked at way back in tutorial 3, where we were getting dust. So we put some cobblestone in and we would get gravel, and that's exactly what this is going to do for us as well. So we're going to put cobblestone in and it's going to make gravel, but we don't need to do anything with it. So let's place a machine. We'll do it up here so we can watch the energy regulator. So we'll place the machine next to the capacitor. Again, as we said, you've got your input area, your output area, and if we put the cobblestone into the input, we can see that it's now transforming the cobblestone into gravel, and it now appears in the output section. So we could go away, we could leave that, we could go and do something else, come back, and we now have more gravel. As you can see, the numbers on the regulator are now starting to jump up and down. That's because this machine uses 12 joules of electricity per second. So our coal generator can create 16 joules per second, and this machine is using 12 of it. So that means there's only 4 spare. However, if we were starting from scratch and we had nothing there, that extra 4 joules would go into the capacitor and it would fill up. You'd be able to store that energy for use later on. We can test that. We can blow up the coal generator again. We can see now that the number of joules is going down. We can see that our energy regulator, usually the one furthest away from the energy regulator, is going to go down first. It's now turning yellow. However, the machine is still producing gravel for us because there's still energy stored inside these capacitors, which we can see there by the energy regulator. Okay. Now you can have as many capacitors connected to an energy regulator as you wish. However, the more capacitors, the more lag it will put on a server. Ideally, Slimefun is more of a puzzle when it comes to electricity. You want to get the most out of it with the fewest number of machines, capacitors, and when we get into it, cargo networks. So we can see here we're nearly out of electricity. If we keep an eye on the machine, we'll see that it will eventually stop because we have ran out of stored electricity. And there we go. Right. Now, Slimefun is not as rigid as some mechanics because you can see here we're now going into minus electricity. Okay, so even if you're in the middle of something quite high powered, you do get a buffer zone of how much electricity you can have. Ideally, you want to keep your numbers in the green, but you can go to negative the amount of power that you have. And the machine has now stopped. If we now add some coal back, we can see that number starts to go back up again. And that is the basics of electricity. It, again, like the ancient altar in the last tutorial, looks very complicated, sounds very complicated, but at its heart, it's actually fairly simple. The only hard bit that you're going to have is grinding all the materials needed to make a really good electric network. What I would suggest is, as soon as you can, is to upgrade from a coal generator. My energy production of choice is the solar generators, because you don't need to remember to put fuel in them. However, the basic one doesn't produce much electricity, but as you get up, they can produce a lot more, okay? And they can even work at night. So that's what I would choose to use. Some people prefer to use nuclear reactors, some people prefer coal generators. My personal preference is to use the sun. Well, that'll wrap it up for this tutorial. I hope this was informative, and if you're enjoying these videos, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and come and join us on play.wondercraft.tv. We'll be happy to have you, and you can get involved with all the Slimefun stuff that we have on there. Okay, so join us for the next one. Goodbye.